Welcome to season 3 of Flywheel Leadership. I'm excited to welcome Ash Seddeek. Ash is the founder and CEO of the Executive Greatness Institute. Ash has coached leaders at Cisco, Uber, Google, HPE, and Sprinklr to deliver powerful strategic narratives and keynote talks that inspire teams, boards, and customers. His focus is simple: turn communication into a leadership advantage that drives execution and growth. Welcome, Ash. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me here, Graham. We're very excited.
Yeah, I love the context of leadership storytelling. I'm really excited to get into that. So,
Awesome.
we open up each show with our Beyond the Bio segment. So I'll ask you a few questions to share more about yourself beyond the highlight reel as an opportunity to learn more about you and your business. All right.
Sure.
So I'd love to hear more about your proudest professional accomplishment.
The proudest professional accomplishment was getting totally surprised by getting a Fulbright scholarship to come to the US and learn about linguistics. That was very exciting to see that on the back of going to college and studying very hard and networking really well, and then it paid off by getting that scholarship, and it was wonderful to be in that community of people that get that scholarship. So that definitely is one of them.
Very cool. Love that. What would you say your superpower is, Ash?
I think I would say my superpower is being able to hear a lot of points from someone and then be able to come back and find the most fascinating point in what was covered and then starting with that. Because a lot of the time, amazing speakers have so much to tell, and then it's usually 30 minutes later. And that's part of what happens in my coaching practice. I would listen to them and say, "Oh my goodness, now I know what it is," and then we bring it all the way to the top.
That's great. So it sounds like a little bit of that, allowing people to share their message, their story, but then really being able to highlight this is what people need to hear more of.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. That's
Right.
great. And I actually think that is a true mark of a great leader in general, right? Whether that's working with a client or your own team, is being able to spot that greatness in people and really be able for them to see that, right? Because sometimes we don't always hear like what we're good at, but when people tell us, they take the time and the care to actually share. That's magical. People love to hear this is what I see in you kind of thing, right? So that's cool.
Exactly. Exactly.
Ash, could you sum up your business and your role in just a couple of minutes of what you do and why you do it and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So I help leaders communicate with a lot more clarity. That is a key driver in how they can inspire audiences as well as create a lot of momentum in their organizations. So that's the flywheel that I see in my business is the clearer our message is, the more influential we are, and the more momentum we are going to have in our business. So that sequence is very critical, and that's really where we focus first on getting a clear message developed to your point, because sometimes we have to do a lot of work thinking through it, talking through it until we hit the gold. And once we find the gold, we bring it to the forefront because that's when it's inspiring for the audiences.
Very cool. Um, when you look at leadership, leading teams, and tying that into that communication, is there anything that you view as maybe a little contrary to what others talk about when it comes to how to communicate with teams, or maybe a little bit of a unique take on that?
Absolutely. I think what's coming up for me a lot of the time is finding out that the more we actually share the backstory with our audiences about ourselves, what's going on in our lives, within reason, of course, what starts to happen is something fascinating. Audiences start to realize, oh my God, Graham is an actual human being. The guy is going through stuff just like us. He is scared because of what's going on with AI or because of this or because of that, just like we are. And because you do share that, all of a sudden the audience leans in and listens to your message a lot more. Whereas The conventional wisdom is I'm just going to show up very stoic and I got, I've got everything under control. And then the audience actually sees through
Yeah.
that. They can
Yeah.
say, you know what, Graham is not telling us everything. I can tell, I can sense it, because it's fascinating how God gave us this sort of extra amazing power where we can sense. We
For
can sense
sure. For
whether
sure.
you are upfront, you're telling me the whole story, or you're holding something back. And that's really where, as much as leaders can tell their audiences what is that they are going through, all of a sudden the audience is tapping into their emotion, they're tapping into that shared human experience, and all of a sudden they're saying, Graham, wherever you're going, I'm jumping on the back of that truck with you, let's go.
For sure. Yeah, I relate to that so much on, when you try to be the tough guy or tough person, and, not have any kind of damage to your armor and all that stuff, right? Try to just be that resilient, which there's obviously the time and a place and a power in that as well. But to be able to show that vulnerability in a real way and just be relatable, show that you are a real person, especially depending in the role and context of the business. There's just so much power in that. People need to see that you are just like them. You're
Absolutely.
just in a different job than they're in, right? And
That's
it's really
it.
important for them to realize there's some real behind that. It's not just this perfect executive or whatever, right? So
Exactly, exactly.
that's so true. Uh, could you share the most impactful leader in your life and how they impacted you?
That's a great one, and definitely, I think for me, my dad was a tailor. He made shirts for other people, and I worked with him for some time. And we always had these moments where I would, be the scientific mind saying, "Oh, look at this or look at that," and then he'll say the most basic piece of wisdom that made me basically believe that sometimes you need to exercise your own mind to think about the situation you're looking at, rather than what the books are telling you and the frameworks are telling you. Just look at it simply as possible, and understand that simplicity sometimes is very obvious, and sometimes we miss out on that simplicity of looking for the simplest of solutions because of the complexity of what we studied or what they tell us in corporate settings. So he basically taught me to always think about how can we simply look at this and solve it, rather than complicate it more than it really is.
That's great. Simplicity has so much power in leadership. So I think that's a really good lead into what what do you see as that role, like when you talk about storytelling, when you talk about your communication, your messaging as a leader, like how do you view that simplicity aspect with that? What's important there?
I think we tied back to this idea of, as much as you actually share with people what's going on, and just realize that it's as simple as that. Just let them know how this whole situation is affecting you as well, because that's the starting point for establishing that trust with them. And as much as we get to trust sooner, everything else is going to get easier to do. Because we talk about change leadership, we also talk about change management. A lot of the time, we are so much focused on this idea of managing the change, but leading the change is where we want to know that our audiences want us to share with them how we're feeling about what's going on. And that's where they start to connect with you. And that's really where storytelling becomes an amazing tool for them to share what's happening, how they are experiencing it, how it ties perhaps something else that has happened in their life in the past. Like we all have stories where we've had some hardship, we suffered through it, we thought we are going to lose our lives, we thought we are going to drown in the water. But you know what happened? I started to swim and I came up for air. And since then, I've been able to create success. And then come back to the present moment and say, you know what? This moment, it might be different, but you know what? We've been through a lot of stuff together. I want to come through it. That kind of leadership storytelling, where as you see me now really feeling the situation, even though it's synthetic, once the leader actually connects to something that's happened in real life for them, the audience forgets everything. They forget their phones, they forget their YouTube shorts, and they just lean into what Graham is telling them. And again, once they lock in what you're telling them, the chances for us getting everybody on board with that change initiative is so much higher.
Thank you, Ash. That's really powerful. That storytelling is such an art, and I'm sure there's some science to it as well, right? But it's such an art that a lot of leaders struggle with. So, could you tell us more about your approach with when you're working with an executive or some leader? How do you kind of walk them through that process? Like, tell me about your process that you work with them on to help them be a better storyteller, be a better communicator.
I loved working at Cisco on the global sales kickoff called the Global Sales Experience. And the best part was seeing John Chambers, who was the CEO of Cisco at that time, really exemplify for me and for so many people this whole concept of leadership storytelling. And what we found out when we were working on these large events, we have to ask some very basic questions. And those questions are, what do you want the audience to know? What do you want the audience to think? And also, what do you want the audience to feel? A lot of the time, this question is missing. And then, of course, the last question could be, what do you want them to do afterwards? So, if we spend some time in the beginning, and that's essentially my formula for success, is spend some time asking yourself those questions because you get so audience centered. And then when you come to that question about what do you want them to feel, then my professional advice is you gotta feel it, Graham, first. If you want them to feel excited, well, God darn it, just bring it to the stage. Because if you tell them, hey, I want you to get excited, but the excitement that is nowhere to be seen on Ash's
Yeah.
Graham's face, then it's not going to work. So usually, then we come back and say, whatever you said, you want the audience to do and feel and think, and know, I want you to bring that to the stage. And that's really where we depend on the fact that the audience will start to mirror how we feel. And that's where I work with a lot of clients on this idea of becoming a chief excitement officer, because if building desire in others starts by building desire in ourselves first, then now we know what we do. We have to show them that, you know what, I'm really excited about AI. I'm really excited about what it's going to do for our organization. And let me explain to you why. And then we explain to them why. And a lot of the time, the why is in the final last mile impact location. Maybe it's the patient at the hospital. Maybe it's the customer. Maybe it's the employee. Maybe it's the people in our community. Connecting them to that human dimension usually then reminds us that it's the purpose for something that we're working on, and that purpose is we're helping these patients get a much better experience when they come into our clinic or they come into our hospital, and so on.
Very cool. Yeah, the mirroring is really interesting when you think about it, and just I don't know if human psychology is the right term to use there, but just being able to kind of feel out an audience and what you're trying to bring to that stage in that room, whatever the application is. Um, that goes back to that trust, though, as you think about it, right? On like, why would I be excited if you're not excited? When you're telling me how I should feel, right? Like I need to feel it from you. I need to feel there's a genuine aspect there. And it's interesting on how all that ties together with like a genuine leader really sharing how they really feel and what they see, that vision, all that. That's going to translate well. Just like if you're selling a widget to a client, like if they don't feel that from you, they're not going to believe it either. It's very similar concept when you think
Pure
about
and
it.
simple.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what else, Ash? When it comes to your mission, like what else would you like to highlight about whether it's the leaders you work with or the results that you see? Anything else come to mind that's important to call out there?
Uh, what we usually end up doing when I'm working with leaders, we end up actually realizing that yes, there is a future that we want to create. The organization is asking you to improve revenue by this much or improve this experience by that much. But the one thing that a lot of the leaders would miss out on is honoring the present as well as the past. So what I end up reminding them is, if you want them to go with you where you want to go, you just want to take a moment and let them know how much you appreciate what they have been able to accomplish today. Because today was yesterday's future. And a lot of the time leaders are so impatient to get to the future that they forget to actually appreciate the present. We're not doing enough employee recognition. We're not doing enough thank yous. We're not doing enough gratitude. And then when we want to achieve the next iteration of success, everybody then looks at us and says, "Oh my God, he's doing it again."
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that we got here, he's asking us to pick up everything and get back up again in the truck because he's saying there's a mountain for us to climb. But what we want to do is we want to basically take a deep breath, let everybody feel that we acknowledge the struggle they have been through, the fact that we are here is a major success. Because if we didn't do what we had to do in the past, we wouldn't be here. So a beautiful component of business storytelling is to remind these leaders to, number one, let's just sit here for a minute. Let's just sit here for a minute, let people know that whatever we are now is amazing. It's just unbelievable to be here. I know where we would have been if we didn't do the things we have done. And I want to acknowledge and I want to appreciate that. And then all of a sudden, we have a lot more people who are willing to say, okay, Graham, where are we going? What's the next thing? Because you know what? We love this cycle. We love the cycle of working with you on something that's very hard and then making it to base. And when we are at base, you tell us, thank you so much for pulling through and bringing us here. So, this idea of connecting the past, the present, and the future, a lot of the time, a lot of leaders will miss out on. And I'm hoping that leaders listening to us today would remember the amazing flywheel effect they would get out of connecting these dots for their audiences. It's beautiful and inspiring when they see you doing that.
So powerful. So I hear, respect. The way I've heard it in the past is respecting the past, create a better future. Or another way to look at that also is to really show appreciation for why we're here. Like really showing the team that, hey, this couldn't have happened without you, and not glossing over that moment to really to show that gratitude and recognize what we've accomplished. Because you're right, like we are all so growth driven in so many cases, right? Where it's do better, faster, stronger, more, whatever the case may be. It's really easy to just kind of blow past what we've accomplished so far. So many organizations and companies have done such great things. Let's talk about that and use that as power for our future. And I think there's something special there when you can harness that, right? And that vision forward. It has. You're right. It has to be anchored in where we came from. What is our story?
Yeah. And what I found so fascinating in the recent few months is this idea of organizational alpha. And I basically said, what is that? Is that something to do with the stock market? And then I found out that the metaphor comes from the stock market, where everybody is performing at a certain level, but if you achieve alpha, that means you're going to get a few percentage points above the market average. And then when you look at that same metaphor in organizations, you'll find that there are organizations, they have the same number of people, they have the same resources, the same dollars, but my God, they are able to do so much more. And I think if you delve deeper, highly likely, Graham, it's going to be the set of leaders in there because of their ability to activate the alpha. And I think, to your point, I think activating the alpha is when you let people know, I'm not going to gloss over what we did. What we did was amazing. The fact that we're here, I can't even believe we are here. When I sit at home and I'm thinking about what happened over the last few years, I tear up because I know how hard it was for us to get here. And as I'm coming over to talk to you about where we're going tomorrow, I feel so bad. I feel so bad that I'm even coming and asking you to give it more. But I
Mhm.
know that what you did in the past is what's encouraging me to come to you because I know you're going to give it the best. And here's where we're going to go. And when we get there, I know I'm going to be as grateful as I am today. So that's a fascinating way of thinking about if I want to get that last mile so that everybody goes beyond the salary, you know, just the mundane and get into the excitement. Well, I have to think about, oh my God, it's the same team. And we've seen it happen with sports. Nothing changed except that coach. And then he came in or she came in, and my God, everything changed. And that's the kind of thing that we want leaders to think about. There is so much power that they have when they look at their audiences and the people they're working with as individual human beings who then come together and form powerful teams and powerful energy, that organizational alpha is something they can achieve.
Very, very cool. Um, I'm inspired right now, Ash. We actually have an offsite here in a couple weeks, and I'm just thinking through the story in my head. I'm like, oh, this is good stuff. Good timing for sure.
Very good. Very good.
Um, when I look at your work, a little bit, I guess, on what you share yourself is a common thread across your ventures and advisory work is conviction, the belief that when leaders communicate with purpose, people follow with energy and commitment. And there's been certain points in my leadership journey where conviction has been so clear or not, and you definitely feel that in a very strong way when it's there or it's not, whether it's in yourself within or your team, right? Anything come to mind that you want to share with this conversation today on just that, the power of conviction?
Yeah, it is a fascinating concept because, you know, having a strong belief that the future is much better is, in a lot of ways, I mean, everybody's going to be betting. There's so much stuff going on. We get into the tariffs, you know, uh, portion of events, and we get into, macroeconomics. Interest rates still high, and then you come back and you say, I still strongly believe that we can. So your audience is from the get go is very skeptic. So the power of conviction is to start at the moment of where the audience is. So the audience is going to be, by definition, it's human nature, we are risk averse. So, from a leadership storytelling perspective, the first thing we would want to do is come to our audiences not with the ivory tower of the future that we envision, but with the skepticism that they have and you have. And you basically, again, come back and say, hey, I know you're thinking it's not going to happen. I know you're thinking it's going to be too hard. And you know what? As I think about it, I tend to agree with you. But at the same time, I look at everything that we've done. And that reminds me that, God darn it, we were in a very similar situation 2 years ago. And everybody was saying, there is no way you're going to be where you are today. You know what that does for me? What that does for me, it tells me that we can. So now I want us to wear a different hat that's really more about the art of the possible. I want us to imagine if we come together again, collective power, collective intelligence, collective determination. Can you just imagine what we would be able to do? And that's really where the power of conviction is so powerful because we know we've seen it happen. When we believed in something and we missed the bus, we missed the flight, we missed this, we missed that. And guess what happened? Because of the conviction, we made it happen. We figured a way. We might have walked or carpooled or whatever it might be that we had to do, but we did it. That sense of determination, again, kind of ties back to that alpha, is that people end up doing amazing things that nobody expected.
Meet them where they are, acknowledge the realities, both that you see and what you think they are thinking, show the vision, and then when the time is right, how we're going to get there.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
That I hear that loud and clear in that story. That's really cool. Um, any times where you've told a story with teams you've led or been engaged with, and it's uncovered results or outcomes, however you want to look at it, revelations on things that maybe you didn't expect, like where you kind of just went down this road with the story you tell, and the outcome maybe wasn't exactly what you expected, but it was even better or different in some way that made it really special. Is there any story you could share there?
There's one story which was a happy surprise. Like I was coaching this leader at one of those high tech companies, and we talked about how she can tell stories, and we literally thought about how can we plant stories in the audience. Like we would actually ask people in the audience to get up and share some of their stories. The interesting thing that happened was a surprise for all of us is that we ended up essentially having a lot of people in the audience crying because of the human connection that happened from the stories that were shared. And then not only that, this speaker, right on the stage at the sales kickoff, everybody in that room got up and gave her a standing ovation. When she shared that news with me, I was totally surprised that it got to that level. It got to the level where there were a lot of people bawling, as well as the standing ovation at the end, which is something that is not conventional. Now, in an annual sales kickoff, you wouldn't even expect something like that to happen. But it was definitely a happy surprise. And from that moment, I think for me, it was learning that definitely storytelling, my goodness, so powerful. And then if you're able to actually have the audience getting the audience engaged somehow, if you're able to activate them, then it's not just Graham,
Mm-hmm.
it's the people that Graham is talking with, because they want to hear from one another, and that is even a lot more powerful. So a lot of the time we think, oh, I am the speaker, I should be the person talking all the time. And I would basically say, think of about a way where instead of it being talking at them, it becomes more of an opportunity to talk with them. And that's sometimes where sometimes you can create some magic. And yes, you may want to also be sort of selective as you do that because you're trying to sort of weave things a certain way. And there's nothing wrong with that because you're really
Mm-hmm.
trying to think about what is the total aggregate benefit I want to achieve. So I'm going to call on those people because I know they have the stories that are in alignment with what we want to achieve.
That's powerful stuff, Ash. What comes to mind for me is like that's a really great way to bring people in to your world, whether that's you as an individual, your company, your vision, your mind, your ideas. But also, as you're talking through that, I'm thinking about just how powerful that is with not making it about you as the speaker,
There you go.
but and you hear about a lot about that as far as like not being nervous during speeches and stuff like that. But I never thought about it in this context of like this isn't about you. This is about what you're trying to help your audience with, and tying it back to that is just really links to storytelling much more than I had expected. That's cool.
And what it has helped me realize is the fact that as we try to become inspiring leaders and connect with our audiences because of whatever it is we want to achieve with them is to see our speaking ability almost as a release plan where maybe release one is I just want to get my word out, I want to talk to the audience and share with them what the plan is. Maybe release two is I really want to get on the stage and feel what I'm going through and connect with the audience in that way. And then maybe the third stage would be the third release is to work on how I would actually make it more about the audience than about me and create that conversation. So it's okay for people listening to us to see that it is an evolution that can happen. And that's what uh, I help leaders go through those stages because it does take some evolution. Because sometimes I could be working with a leader where we're basically trying just to clear out the speech fillers, which takes so much power away from that leader as he or she is speaking. And then we get to the point where can we actually develop ability to do those powerful pauses so that we can be in the moment and reflect on what we are saying. And then coming back to what you said, Graham, how can we then think of ways to engage the audience? That's a whole powerful level where you are in so much confidence in yourself that now you are able to release the energy and the anxiety and turn it into more of an engaging conversation. And all of a sudden, you're like a moderator. You feel like I'm here just to activate the power and the energy in the room. And when that happens, that's much even bigger magic that can happen there.
So as you've worked with all these leaders, I have to ask you, like you've coached people across different size companies, different levels, lots of different personalities, specific roles, types of responsibility. What separates the best leaders from the rest of the leaders? Like what, when you look at those common threads, like, and tying it back to that storytelling, like what have you seen as really that separator from those that elevate to that next level and those that are kind of more in that ordinary bucket? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just understanding what really takes somebody to that exceptional level.
I would say those who are able to activate their own kindness a lot more. Because, of course, we all have levels of kindness. But if they are able to activate the kindness in a way that they themselves realize their humanity, and they give themselves the space to make mistakes sometimes and not be too hard on themselves. Because a lot of the time, we are not allowing ourselves to learn by not allowing ourselves to make mistakes. And I think doing the storytelling and being vulnerable is a space where a lot of people say, Graham, you're out of your mind.
Yep. Yep.
You're going to tell them that story? Are you sure you're going to tell them that story? And I'm like, yes, we're going to tell them that story. But the way we're going to tell them the story, we're going to come from a kindness aspect where, you know what? This was real life. This is what happened. This is what I had to go through. And that's the moment where it was the worst moment. I basically shut the door. I'm not opening to them, not calling anybody. I have had it, and that was it. But that's when we basically say that kindness of sharing the story, because you're allowing others to see that it was okay for them to be in these moments as well. And that kindness then allows us to learn and adapt and go through those releases that we talked about, because then we can get to the moment where, oh my goodness, now I feel so good at doing this. And I feel so good about it because it's going to allow me to activate others.
We've gone through a fair amount, Ash. I guess the one question that pops up is, what have I not asked you that you do want to talk on? Like anything that comes to mind that you're like, we haven't really hit on this, but we really should, given this conversation.
Absolutely, I think one of the things that we always face with a lot of leaders is, without exception, a lot of them will tell you they don't have the time of day. I mean, it's so busy. There's so much going on. And the one thing that I encourage everybody listening to us is to push in that direction, to push in the direction of choosing hard. And one of those aspects is to look at what you're doing and asking yourself the hard question about, do you really need to do this yourself, or can you delegate it? Have you thought about maybe developing somebody on the team to do more? And you keep telling yourself that there's no way Ash can do this or Graham can do that. And I love our leaders to question and push back on that thought, because the model that I want people to walk away with is the model that basically says, free up, think up, and speak up. A lot of organizations look up for leaders to not only manage today's business, but to create a future that's much better than today. In order for them to do that, they have to free up some of their capacity to think up the beautiful innovations and new experiences that they can have within the business. And then, in order for them to build the kind of desire and alpha that we want to achieve, they're going to have to go around and speaking up about it and getting everybody else on board and aligned and enrolled in this idea. So the very first step of freeing up is where most of us are having the toughest struggle. And a lot of the demons that we're fighting there are our own.
For
so,
sure.
so definitely push back and say, you know what, I can definitely ask this person to do this. They may need my support in the beginning. That's okay. So again, we look at it as a release plan. They not may not be able to do it on their own from the get-go. That's okay. Maybe in the beginning we partner up. Then I step back and it's like 80-20, and then I step back and then it's 90-10, and then I step back and they are able to do it 100%. And now I have 10-15% more capacity.
So free up, think up, speak up.
Yes, it's simple to remember, and the first step is the hardest.
Yes, yes. Delegation, that's a challenge for many at any level, for
Yes.
sure. Uh, Ash, anything you've shared a lot on your story. Anything that you have questions for me on?
I would ask you. I definitely love the title of the podcast, and I think the flywheel
Thank you.
effect is an amazing, amazing thing for people to think about. And I'm sure there's a part in your own leadership practice where the flywheel effect shows up, and it really inspired you.
Yeah, that's a deep question, Ash. I appreciate it. You're throwing it back at me today. Um, Jim Collins was has been such an inspiration for me. I feel I read the book way too late, but once I read Good to Great, like everything changed for me. It was quite inspiring and really eye opening for me. And as I read through that book, that really called out some of the strengths in my own leadership game and areas of improvement, and really highlighted the power of I've got a deep experience in talent recruitment, things of that nature, and it really highlighted the power of people in the flywheel effect, and just more of that compounding perspective on relationships, and not just to know people, but really get to know people at that deeper level, and being able to translate that into true business results and outcomes,
Yeah.
and really make that a core tenet of a business is connection internally, and then of course with clients externally. And that has really changed a lot of things for me, is not seeing it as so transactional. Not that I ever intended for it to be that way, but that was a real game changer for me, of just that relationship compounding, and really creating true capital versus like transactional tactics all the time between people, if
Love
that
that.
makes sense.
I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you're saying because it's basically telling us there's a deeper value to being present and connecting with that long term impact that you'll get from investing in the relationship versus, going through one transaction after another. And I think a lot of people listening to us will find a lot of value in that. That's really why in my coaching practice, I use this term exponential value moments to refer to those moments that you have with clients, you have with your team, where as a result of the conversation you're having with them, you're able to inspire them and help them focus on that long term impact. I love what you said because I mean, it's going to leave an impact with me to also be more present and focus more on how there is a compounding effect to really focusing on the relationship.
Thank you, Ash. I'm trying to think who had mentioned it in the past, but I once saw somebody speak, and they talked about, I think it was kind of like jumping through those windows, those moments of, oftentimes we find ourselves as leaders thinking about what we should say, should do, those steps that we know are there. They're in the back of our mind, or
Yeah,
even top of mind, but we almost like delay, hesitate, think, oh, that's not important right now, and kind of kick the can and then never end up doing it, right? Oftentimes, those are the moments where we have the opportunity to make an impact on our teams or clients or relationships. And that's a lot of what I'm hearing from you too, is like seizing that moment. You already know in your heart and your mind, like that's the right thing to do. And sometimes we just don't listen to that enough, to where it's like, That's the real people connector right there, is when we step out and we go that extra mile with someone, and when we don't, we oftentimes regret that, is not stepping into that window of opportunity.
Absolutely. And what you're saying reminds me that we need to let people know that communication is not about sending the message. It is so much more about the message being received, understood, and acted upon. And then not only that, we of course need to remember how it would make them feel. And if we connect the dots across those, then highly likely our message would have a whole lot more impact than us just feeling, oh, I'm going to go into this meeting and I want to tell them this and this and that. And I love what you're saying, because we want them to start thinking about that audience a whole lot more and what's going to happen as a result. And only by connecting, to your point, at that level that you described, the more likelihood that the message will be received. And that's really the gold that you're looking for.
So true. It's so often that we want to say that thing, get that point across, send that email, whatever, right? Where it's how it's received that matters. You can check the box and do the thing, but it doesn't matter if it's not received how you intend. So much power in just having a true intention behind the action we're taking versus just that get it done mindset in a negative way, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Um, how can our listeners best find you or follow you and your company?
Definitely LinkedIn is one location. The other location is communicatewithclarity.co, is where we have a lot of our coaching offers and programs. And Ash at executivegreatness.com is a fast way to also reach out to me. And I highly recommend people to connect on LinkedIn, because that will be a very easy way for us to stay connected as well.
Very good. I will add those to the show notes for sure. Last question for you, Ash. What do you want those who have worked with you to say about your impact on them?
That it made them feel the impact of the work they are doing, and they were able to connect at that same level with their audiences.
Very good. Ash Seddeek, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you sharing.
Really loved it, Graham. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care.